everyone, so for today's tutorial I'm going to start off by applying a bald cap which I got from the Makeup Armoury. This is a vinyl bald cap and I already have a tutorial on this process which I will link on screen for you now. And I also waxed out Billy's brows so they are flat to the skin, and again I have various tutorials on how to do this which I will link below for you. Darth Maul's look is all about symmetry, so for me the easiest place to start was with the horn that's on the crown of the head. I made these and painted them myself, and I have a tutorial coming up next on how to create these. The tutorial for these will be up in a couple of days. If you're watching this late, then I will link the tutorial for these on screen now. So to mark out the areas where the horns are going to sit, I'm using a face liner pencil by Kryolan, but any kohl pencil would do. I'm using a white one as it's easy to disguise with the paint, and I've drawn a guide around the back half of my horn. Then I want to draw a line from there down to above the ear, and this is going to be the divider between the red paint and the black paint. And you want to do this on both sides, so you should have a soft upside down V shape. Halfway down that line and around the temple area you want to draw a C shape, or rather a backward C on this side and a normal C on the other. And then in line with the centre of the ear, we're going to draw a line down towards the corner of the mouth. And you kind of want to follow the natural curvature of the face here. We want to draw a line from either side of the nose down towards the line that we've created on the cheek. I have made it slightly curved, but I do straighten the lines afterwards. And you also want to create a V underneath the nose like I've done on the top lip. Under the bottom lip, we're creating a kind of almost like a fat hourglass shape, and we're rounding that off around the chin. Down the centre of the forehead, I've drawn a line to the centre of the eyebrows. And then on the very centre of your head, just above where your hairline starts, is where the first horn will sit, which you want to draw a circle around, and then we're going to line up the horns that go next to it, but slightly higher. For me, I found the easiest way to do this was to place Billy's middle finger on the centre horn, and then however his two fingers sat either side of that was where the next two horns were going to go. For me, that was the easiest and quickest way to find symmetry on where those horns need to sit. I placed those at the end of where Billy's fingers sat, so they sit slightly higher than the centre horn. I also placed one in the temple area in the middle of that C shape that we've created, and that's on both sides. And then I worked my way around the back of the head, placing them in a symmetrical pattern so that they follow a circle around the crown of the head. Now we want to build up a lip for these horns to sit into, so I'm going to use Sculpt Gel. I got this from one of my favourite makeup stores, which is the Makeup Armoury, and I will link their store below for you. So Sculpt Gel is a 3-component silicone gel, and I absolutely love it for creating prosthetics without having to mould things, and it's nothing I have to do in advance. I can work straight onto my model and it lasts all day. So as I don't need any flexibility to these little circles, I've not used the softener, which is part C, so I've only mixed equal parts of A and B together. And I'm using my spatula to apply this product at a slight angle so the bottom half of the silicone blends in with the skin, and so that the top half lifts upwards, creating a bit of a lip, or rather a circular wall, and that's going to be where our horn sits in. You do want to take it slightly inside the guideline, because then that's going to allow the horn to sit inside it and it will be encased in that lip. While it's still wet, you want to go around with your spatula and clean up all your edges to make sure they're nice and smooth. In the original makeup for Darth Maul, I wasn't very keen on how they applied these little horns. You could see that they were just stuck on, and you could see them just sitting on top of the skin. Whereas I want the base of the silicone to be flush with the skin. To paint these little silicone rings, I'm going to use the FX Skin Illustrator palette. These are alcohol activated paints, and the colour I'm going to be using is black. I'm using my bent liner brush by Delium Tools to apply this directly to the silicone. You can use water-based paints, but I find over the silicone it tends to separate, so you need to kind of blow on it so it dries as you apply it if you want to get a nice coverage. These alcohol activated paints just go over it no problem, and they don't shift, which is really good. And you just want to go around and paint all 10 of your silicone rings. Now I'm taking some Ben Nye Spirit Gum, which I also got from the Makeup Armoury, and I'm applying this directly to the base of my horns. And once that's gone slightly tacky, I'm then going to place it inside the rim of the silicone housing that you've made. You may need to lift it slightly with your fingers to get the horns inside, but as long as they sit nice and snugly, you can leave them in place and the spirit gum will dry, and then they will stick to the bald cap. While I fitted the ones that were sat on top, I got Bill to hold in the temple ones just to make sure that they didn't fall out. Then just go around and place all your other horns in and make sure they're facing in the right directions. Next I'm going in with some Supra colour by Kryolan, and I'm taking the black grease paint, and I'm going to use this to start painting on top of the ball cap around the areas that the silicone is sitting. Again, you can just use a water-based black paint, but as you go over the silicone areas you will need to blow on it so that it dries as you apply it. For me this is quicker. Applying the grease as a base allows the paint to sit over it and then it just dries beautifully without needing to blow on it or have extra layers. The face paint I'm going to use is by Superstar. I'm using black on a large brush and I'm applying this all to the back of the head, around the ears and around the neck, and then onto the face to where that guide is around the cheeks. I always apply 2 layers to the rest of the skin where there is no grease paint underneath. That way we'll get a nice intense opaque black finish. When you're working close to the guideline, it's good to switch up your brush to a nice flat one with a sharp edge. That way you'll get a nice clean crisp finish. And then any smaller detailed lines you can just use a very small liner brush. That will give you more precision, meaning you're less likely to make any mistakes. Now I'm going to repeat the same process using the red Supra colour and the red Superstar paint. The grease paint is going to go over the silicone and then the red paint is going to go over the top. As I said before, the grease paint isn't necessary if you've got a fan handy so that you can paint over the silicone and make sure that you're blowing air onto it as it dries. The grease paint will however come in handy at covering the eyebrows. So as you can see, I'm using a smaller brush to go around the guide so that it matches up with the black line and we get that nice crisp finish. There's no blurry lines here. What I would say might make it easier for yourselves is always to start from the top, especially if you're working on somebody else, because sometimes you might want to rest your hand on their face while you do some of the detailed work. And obviously if you start from the bottom up, that can become difficult. Sometimes it's worth investing in a makeup puff so that you can use that to press onto the skin. That way you won't be sort of printing your hand on the black and then printing it onto the red. You'll probably see later on that I actually use a little bit of tissue to rest my finger on so I don't disturb the paint. For the eyebrows, I layered the paint on first, then I layered a coat of the grease paint, then another coat of the face paint. I found that gave me that nice matte finish at the end and it also gave me the coverage that I needed. You can however apply some foundation to your eyebrows to disguise them first, set that in place and then you can layer the paint over the top. If you decide to do that option, definitely use a patting motion when you layer the paint over the foundation so that you don't get that milky finish. On the top of the crown towards the back, I'm using a small Kryolan liner brush to apply a black dot as my guide. This is my starting point for the kind of elongated triangular shapes that we have around the horns. Unless you're going to use a stencil, the best way to do it really is just to freehand it. It does not need to be perfect. Be conservative first because you can always make them bigger, but to make them smaller, layering the red paint over the black will end up inevitably giving you a bit of a muddy appearance. So as you can see here, the one on the right is slightly lower, but I can then go in on the left and just elongate the black so that they're more level. Again, stick with your small liner brush because you can be more precise with the shape. And if you need to rest your hand onto the skin, then I would advise definitely putting down a powder puff or some tissue. On that front horn, you're creating a bit more of a peak, so you're bringing it down into a triangular shape. Then I just touched in the red around that shape and I also layered the brows like I said earlier to give me that coverage. So I'm now going to paint a line directly down the centre of the forehead towards the centre of the brows, and as you can see I'm using a piece of tissue to steady myself so I'm not taking the paint off of the face. I'm lining directly underneath Billy's eyebrows and then I'm curving him up towards his natural arch. Everybody's face shape is slightly different, so you will need to adapt it to your face shape or your model's face shape, continuously using your reference image as a guide. So now I'm drawing some line work coming down from the 2 horns on either side of the head. They're pretty simple to create, but getting them symmetrical is going to be the hardest part. So keep taking a step back to look to make sure they're as symmetrical as you can make them, but again they don't have to be perfect. If you're not too great with freehanding paintwork, then you might want to consider making a stencil that you can place onto the skin. You can do this out of acetate and you can use a craft knife to cut out the shape and then you can place this onto the skin and then just paint over your stencil. And the great thing is you only have to make one, you can clean it off and then turn it over and you can create the exact same shape on the opposite side. I've just freehanded some diamond shapes down the nose, following the same pattern that I can see on Darth Maul. There's kind of no real easy way to describe each shape, it's just a case of following my reference image, and then you can do the same, or you can just follow the patterns that I'm creating on Billy's face. I'm now going to be drawing around the eyes, and this is all going to be filled in with black. If you find that you get quite greasy eyelids, you can paint over it with the black first, and then you can set that in place with some black eyeshadow. If you're going to be cosplaying as Maul, then you might find this beneficial. So I'm just connecting the lines from the eyes to the cheek area, and then around the nose I'm using my Dedium Tools filbert brush because it's got a rounded tip. It's allowed me to create the perfect rounded shape around the nostrils and sharp lines in a V shape around the tip of the nose. Underneath the nose we're also creating a V shape. I'm also using the same brush to fill in around the top lip and around the chin. On that bottom lip we want to apply a base of red first, and then we're going to go in with a smaller brush to apply the black detailing. So if any of you are wondering why I didn't remove the black before the red, it's because I knew I'd be going in with black over this area. So we're just creating 3 black lines on that bottom lip, and once again I'm using my small Kryolan liner brush to do this. The middle line extends down towards the chin, and then we create a kind of arch shape, so like an upside down horseshoe. Going back to my red Superstar paint, I'm now going to line the top of the rings. This isn't super vibrant, it's quite subtle, so apply the colour and then just tap it down with your finger. For some reason I managed to get black onto the front horn, but I take that off at the very end. And once again I'm using my Kryolan liner brush to do this. So our red paint looks great, but it is a little bit too perfect. So I'm going to use a matte black eyeshadow to create a bit more dimension to the face. It's also going to take down the vibrancy of that red and give more a bit more of a worn looking appearance. So I'm using a small fluffy blending brush to apply this to the inner corners of the eyes. This helps to create a bit more of a demonic appearance to the eyebrows. I'm also applying it directly underneath the eyes. To do this I'm using an angled brush, pulling the colour off of the black so it fades into the red. Going back to my small blending brush, I'm working some of this colour in around the temple area and also above the eyebrows. A little tip is to definitely use a very light hand when you're doing this, because sometimes black eyeshadow will stick to any texture that might be on the paint, and the last thing you want is blobs of black. So I keep a brush with a little bit of the paint on so it's slightly damp, and I can work this over the top of any of the black eyeshadow that's a little bit intense. Make sure that your brush really is only very slightly damp, otherwise you will disturb the paint underneath as well. So now I've done the top half of the head, I'm now working this down around the sides of the cheeks and also a little bit down the sides of the nose. Here you can see me using that very ever so slightly damp brush. All it's doing is softly buffing over the black to soften it a touch. Dipping that same brush into a bit more of the red, I'm now going to tap in any areas I've missed with the red to make sure we've got nice crisp lines and none of that natural skin tone is coming through. I'm taking a small amount of that black down the sides of the nose, again to make it look less flat in this area and that the nose is actually a feature on the face. So I'm just painting around the neck to make sure that no skin is visible, and then I'm popping a small amount of red into the waterline of the eye, and Billy popped in some contact lenses. I just dropped down the studio lighting so you can appreciate the colours. The red is so vibrant, it looks bloody awesome. Also you can see how intense the black is, because in studio lighting obviously it makes it look a little bit lighter. Products will be listed and linked below. If you've got any questions, please leave them in the comment section below and I'll do my best to get back to you. Don't forget the horns video will be coming next, so subscribe to make sure you don't miss that. Please give this Halloween tutorial a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Also, you can follow me outside of YouTube. My social handles are on screen. If you missed last week's tutorial, it'll also be on screen. Thank you for watching and I'll see you again soon. Bye!